What's up, everybody? Welcome to CFP Talks. My name is Joe Nissim, and with me today is a very special guest from our November cohort, Mr. Dennis Hammond. How are you, sir? Good to see you. Look at him all well rested.
Likewise, Joe, it's good to see you as well. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. No complaints. Just getting ready for the holidays, getting ready for our next CFP cohort, which is, obviously very exciting. But why don't we just dive right in if that's cool with you? And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in CFP?
Yeah, sure. So, a little bit about myself. I work in the financial industry at Charles Schwab as an associate financial advisor. Been in the industry for about 2.5, almost going on 3 years now. And my interest in the CFP came in college when I was taking a financial planning class with one of my professors. And he was such an inspiration in my journey. And from that point on, it's been quite a while to make it to this point, but I'm glad I had to make it to this point. And
Mm.
yeah, it finally feels good to see it pass this time around. So I'm glad about that.
Okay, so tell us, did you do the like a financial planning education when you came like through school, or was it somebody that was kind of like a an adjunct professor that was inspiring?
I did. So it's a twofold. So at the college I went to, there was a opportunity to be a financial coach on campus. So I did that. And also I was taking financial planning courses that would be equivalent to the CFP part of the education component.
Mm-hmm. So you walked out kind of education ready and ready to go right into the exam.
For most of it, I would say there were still two classes that I had to take, and so I took most of it in Michigan. But then when I transferred to Texas in a new financial role, that's where I took the remaining classes at a university out there in Texas to
Mhm.
complete the full educational part.
So, were you, by the time you were ready to sit for the exam, were you already client facing?
To that point, I would say it was mostly client facing for sure, but more in a service capacity, not as far as like what I'm doing now in an advising capacity.
Got it.
So yep.
Okay, so you get interested in the CFP during college. How long until you were out of college and working did you decide, hey, it's time for me to sit down for the exam? And how did you prepare for the first time that you took the exam?
Yeah, well, I'll say since my junior year is where the interest of first started. Senior year is where I feel like I want to take this exam. But I knew just from transitioning from Michigan to Texas, starting a new role, wanting having to go through the FINRA licenses and make sure I take care of that part because my job's on the line.
Yeah,
So
that might be a little bit important.
yeah, exactly. So I had to I had to take like a step back from wanting to take the exam sooner, only because it's a new role, new job, new location. So a
Certainly.
lot of different transitions coming up, but it was always on my mind. So I would say the end of from the end of when I graduated around May in 2023 is when I was like, this is around the time I want to take the test, but I knew
Mhm.
I still had to complete two remaining courses and also do a review course as well before I could actually sit for the test.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that first time you did take the exam. Did you feel like you prepared well? Did you feel like maybe you were shocked by the exam? We've gotten kind of a wide range from some of your classmates who, we've done this conversation with, where some people felt like I kind of took a shot in the dark, and others felt like, man, the exam shocked me and I had no idea it'd be in that detail. Where do you fall in that range of your first attempt of the exam?
Yeah, the first attempt, from when I was listening to other colleagues and people that took it, I knew what to expect, but the way I tackled it didn't align with the exam, if that makes sense. So I always knew I had a good work ethic and study ethic, but the way I was studying didn't align with the actual exam. And that's when I took the exam, I was like, okay, this is a lot more challenging because the the areas on what they're challenging on, the way they're phrasing the questions, I wasn't as prepared for that. I was just mostly going through, hurrying up, getting through, reading the material. All right, did I
Sure.
read this?
Mm-hmm.
Check. Did I take this amount of questions? Check.
Mm-hmm.
But the part of like really understanding how they can ask these questions, what exactly are they looking for, and understanding the topics, that's the part where I just completely rushed through. So when the exam came and I took it, man, like even while taking the exam, I just knew there was certain stuff where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna have to mark this, move on, because I clearly do not understand what they're talking about. And I was like, after I finished, I was like 50-50. This could be, I could have passed
Yeah.
or I couldn't have. So when I saw that results, it was reflective for me to understand that, hey, I clearly rushed through this process and thought that if I just answered 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 questions, and I kind of approached it the way I did the way I was taking FINRA licenses, and I'm like, the way to prepare for the FINRA licenses compared to this, it's different to the extent on what they're questioning you.
Mm.
And so that's what I really learned from this. I'm like, it's a different approach on how they're asking the questions.
Yeah, I mean, FINRA licenses tend to lend themselves where if you put in enough grind work, you can get yourself across the finish line.
Yep. And that's what I was coming in with.
Right.
That's exactly, I was like, I've took those and I know what it takes to get those. So let me try that approach. And that's when I was like, okay, I have to do something completely different.
Yeah. Did you feel like you had a grasp of the concepts, or did you feel like you had just seen things enough times? Because, I'm looking back at my notes from the first time that we met, and I'm looking back at your results from that first exam where, you were split, where you had a couple sections that you did well and a couple sections that you did poorly.
Mhm.
And it seems like the things you did well, you did really well in, but the things you didn't do well in, you really didn't do well in. What do you think led to that exam result? Did you feel like just the grinding through the questions gave you enough memorization to do well on a portion of the test, or do you think it was something else?
I think that was part of it because I just going through all those questions. That was a big part of it. But as far as like understanding certain topics within, especially for the areas I did not do good on,
Yeah.
that's where I lacked. And I could tell when I was taking the exam, I was like,
Mm.
I haven't seen it phrased this way.
Yeah.
And of course, the board is very intelligent and aware of, we're going to make sure the way we craft these questions, they don't want it to be what we've seen already before. So that's
Of course
that's
not.
kind of where that's kind of where it got me because I'm like all these questions and then I see these questions. I'm like, whoa, I actually do not know this concept the way I thought I did because I was developing question confidence based on material
Yeah.
that I already have cycled through more than once, but I wasn't actually gaining concept confidence of understanding how does this apply
Yeah.
given the situation.
So what motivated reaching out to me? Because again, you were in that situation where you were split down the middle. So,
Mhm.
it's really easy to go, a little bit more time and a little bit more effort. And, I take two more topics green and I pass. And I don't necessarily need to do anything more than that. What motivated you to sit down with me, and what were some of your initial impressions after we had that first meeting?
Well, I definitely do a thorough review before I go into like another provider. And when I was listening to the students that you worked with in the past, and when I heard them share how they work with you, that was one part of it. And then when I also saw the results, and when I saw, like, okay, this is great to see, like, everybody's doing pretty well at this. And when I also had did the research on the website and saw the way it's broken down to, from understanding the concepts in the first half, and then the second half, we're going to develop more endurance on questions, but still making sure we're hitting those fundamentals and those. And then once I did that, and then I contacted you and we went through the questions, and I saw the way that the questions were framed. Because at first I just got the Q bank, thought, oh, I'll just supplement the Q bank. But when me and you met, and your approach on, like, let me see where your strengths are, your weaknesses are, and then the approach of being in a classroom setting and doing that for about 8 weeks, that's where I was like, this is a great structure for me. And this is going to challenge me more than if it was just me doing it on my own island or working, here and there with a few colleagues on this. So that accountability for one, the structure, two, in a way that you and your other colleague was also able to help break down the information to us in the class and challenges. That was the turning point for me to say, hey, let me go ahead and get on board with this.
So, you signed up probably, if memory serves me correctly, you were pretty tight on that, where I think you had signed up about a week prior. I think you and I had met at somewhere around, if memory serves me correctly, somewhere around the end of August. Hang on, August 26th, and class
Yep.
started shortly thereafter. So, you go in and obviously you see it on the website, but then now you get to experience it for real. What
Yep.
what do you think your biggest takeaways were from those first 4 weeks of class, where in that first phase of class we don't give you multiple choice and we do
Mhm.
ask you to think things out and then come to class and review them with your colleagues, and then obviously we review them in the larger group. What were some of the things that maybe shocked you? What things maybe did it help you reiterate? Like, what were your biggest takeaways from those first 4 weeks?
My biggest takeaways is the fact how it wasn't just going through like multiple choice questions, but actually
Right.
understanding how does this concept apply, and let's answer this thoroughly. That was a
Mm,
great part that I really enjoyed, along with the weekly accountability, because there were some weeks where it may have been harder to come to class, or like life, we ebb and flow. One week we may feel motivated, next week not. But that's where what makes discipline different from motivation, because we're just constantly doing this over and over regardless of our feelings.
mm,
So that was the huge point, was the accountability, along with the structure too. So the
mm.
structure, the accountability, but really understanding when we're having these questions and working with the colleagues in the class on, without it being multiple choice, to really understand it. That was like a game changer, because I didn't approach that the first time around.
So we end that. Now you kind of start to feel like you have a deeper understanding of some of the context and, all of this. And obviously there's a lot, and we try to cover a majority of what's in, what's going to be covered on the exam. But now
Hmm.
we kind of start to really bring it home with the questions. And, we start off by, we have a week of 60 and then our 80s and then so on and so on. Were you shocked by the intensity of the last month of class? Were you kind of ready for it by, listening to other students from previous cohorts who, had also spoken to this? Or did you feel like this is exactly the thing that I needed, and kind of embraced it? Or were you a little slow to kind of pick up on it and embrace it? Where do you feel
I
like
would,
you were? I'm sorry, I didn't
yeah,
mean to
I
cut you
would.
off.
Oh, that's completely fine. I would say that I wasn't shocked by it just from listening to, because before signing for the class, I was already listening to previous cohorts experience, and even during the class, I was still listening to what like the last cohort was saying. So I
Yeah.
wasn't shocked by it, but I would say that it was very helpful. The structure was helpful, because again, the way I was addressing questions, the previous structure, I feel like I was just kind of like not approaching it in a more holistic and making sure I'm
Mm,
covering all the topics in this structure, the last 4 weeks, we made sure to cover every topic, and then on tilt a little bit more towards our weaknesses.
Hmm.
Which the last time around, I wasn't really. Yeah, I just all I can remember is I just kept going through questions after questions. I just had to make sure. eh, Yeah, but this time around, we made sure to address every topic every week, and then I know me and you will speak too because I still felt like shaky on certain areas,
Hmm.
and so we're to make sure to like tilt a little bit more towards it, but don't just specifically only focus on that. At least not for the beginning of the 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So I really like that cadence of knowing every, and also the flashcards. That was a big thing for me too because I didn't do that last time neither. So that was huge. Like that was great too because it was I was excited for that part.
Yeah.
Because that was like where I'm doing more of a active recall approach on do I understand this
Yes.
concept? And
Yes.
sometimes I would understand it more than what it would say on the back of the flashcard. And
No.
that's when I knew, all right, I'm getting somewhere with this. I'm
Yes.
retaining that information.
Yeah. And for the hardest part of phase two of class is you're doing a lot of questions and it doesn't necessarily jive right away. And for
Yep.
everybody, they kind of have this point where, they hit this point where like things just start making sense. Partly because of the repetition, partly because of the recall, partly because you start getting in the problem solving mode.
Yep.
And I think, we had some people in the class who kind of got there right around the end of week five. We had some people kind of in week six. For others, it took all the way to week seven for them to get there. And, I had mentioned to this before we hit this recording that kind of week six, you started turning around where,
Hmm.
and I think for you, it was kind of like the culmination of your flashcards. And, I remember Ramen, kind of getting on you to read the question, answer what the question is
Yep.
asking, read the question,
Yep.
answer what it's asking. Because obviously, as practitioners, you see a situation in front of you and your head starts going in a hundred different directions. Oh, I would do this and I would do this and I'll fix this and I do this. And the question might be asking you something that is completely unrelated. But again, you know, we know that the board and their question writers are certainly not unaware how
Hmm.
practicing advisors think. And
Yep.
sometimes some of those answers are geared towards that little ADD part of our brain that kind of goes right to that answer immediately. I'm not, and I don't even finish reading the sentence. Do you think it was that? Do you think you got a little bit more focused? Like what happened kind of midway through phase two where we started seeing your scores tick up? We started seeing, you and I were emailing quite a bit in that time frame where we were making sure that, hey dude, you got to go back and you got to address this and this specifically. And we would get really specific on some of those items that you really had to go back and review. Do you feel like you just hit a point where the repetition started paying off? Do you think you took the flashcards more seriously? Like, what was that turning point for you as to why we started seeing a real improvement in your scores?
Yeah, I think the part when Ramen was talking about like look at what the question's asking, don't try to, build a hypothetical or go or look deeper in the situation and what's presented. That was part of it. And then also the part where you were emailing the specific topics to focus on. So with that, I would take more notes in the book and also your videos. Those were helpful too. So made sure to spend time going through almost all of those videos just to really make sure I'm understanding. But particularly for the ones with the concepts that you told me like spend more time on, definitely went to the videos and reviewed more of my notes on those as well.
So it sounds like a kind of culmination of like things coming together from the flashcards, the
Yep.
focusing on the review, and obviously what we're doing in class. How did
Yep.
you find some of the problem solving stuff that we gave you guys in class to do in the back half? Now, obviously, you're not coming to class and reviewing your assignments anymore. You're now kind of doing what we consider to be like exam level types of problem solving. How did you feel
Mhm.
like that translated into exam day?
Oh, that was great. Especially with a part. I did like the part where it was not open book. But having the open book part was helpful because I was able to see
Yeah,
this is where I went wrong. But I just knew I was like, all right, I know this test is gonna be open book. So
of course.
I did try to make sure I'm like, all right, let me not get comfortable with going to the open book and
Yeah.
reviewing my notes. Yeah.
So that's good. So let's kind of segue into the mock exams and exam day. So obviously, we have our cadence for our mock exams in class. Tell me a little bit about what your approach was like on those mock exams and how it evolved from mock one to mock three.
Okay, yeah, sure. So, even reflecting back on the first time, I took like the two mock exams and then just took the one free one from the board. But I didn't really analyze it when I look back, I didn't really analyze it. I just looked at it like, okay, if I maybe got like a 55 or 60, I'm like, okay, I should be in good shape. But I didn't really take the time to analyze the sections and how I can improve upon. This time around, made sure to like spend time analyzing these mock exams. And honestly, that was the most challenging part because even after like one or two, I was fine. But there was one of those exams where I really just felt the fatigue, and it wasn't even like question fatigue, but it was more of exam fatigue.
Mock two.
Because I know, yep, because altogether, I believe I had took four mock exams
That's right.
this time around. So yeah, that right there in itself was just, man. By that third one, I was like fatigued, and it showed.
Mm,
So when you and Ramen was like, make sure take your rest, and that was another thing, great advice that you and him mentioned on every time treat this mock exam like it's the real exam. Because I remember the last time around, I'll take the mock, but I definitely didn't treat it like the real thing. Like I took it comfortably, just I didn't put myself in like this is the exam. Like I just didn't treat it like that. I knew,
mm,
like in my mind, I'm like, I knew it's not the exam, so let me just treat it like a regular exam. I just gotta pay attention longer. But
that's
this
right.
time, I made sure to treat it like the actual exam. In the complex I'm at, there would be like a study room section. So I made sure like don't bring anything other than a calculator and water. And the time I would take it would be pretty consistent. I would mostly take the exam like around 8 or 9 in the morning. But I remember that third mock exam, when I tried it and felt that fatigue, I remember I didn't sleep well. I took the exam like around 10, and it was so interesting where I felt the experience of what it would be like if I didn't do all the other things outside of practicing, like taking care of my well-being as far as, good sleep, exercise. I had felt that during the mock exam process. And I was like, okay, I see why, Ramen was saying this is very important as well. Not only just studying for the content, but also taking care of our well-being.
Yes, and it requires you to do multiple exams because
Yep.
you can get yourself motivated and up for one exam,
Yep.
right? It's like watching a team that starts off. I'm a Knicks fan and I'm a big NBA guy, so you know, watching a team that starts off with the first 15 games and they win a ton of games, you're like, great. Where are you by the All-Star break? Because
Right.
and you see a lot of teams where they have a great start. They go, 8-2 in their first 10 games or 9-1 or even 7-3. You're like, wow, they started off hot. They're having a great season. 10 games later, they're at, 10 and 10 and you're sitting there going, how the heck do they lose seven of their next 10? And
Mhm.
you're like, wow, like they're a mediocre team, which is where we kind of expected them to be. And that goes for all of us is that it is one thing to have one good mock. It is one thing to have another good mock, but across three mocks, you're going to get an experience where you're going to realize how important managing yourself throughout the exam is. And that's not
Mhm.
something that you can replicate without reps.
Yep.
And I was really happy when you had that experience because I think you were going in going, I know the content so much better now. And the
Mhm.
thing that me and Ramen tried to stress on you was It's great that you know the content, but you still got to go in there and perform for the 170 questions. And if you're not going in there to perform for 170 and you decide you want to show up for 140, you give the exam away. And that was the mental thing where when we saw when you had that bad exam, you're like, I didn't sleep well. You know, I kind of took some liberties here, and you can
Hmm.
see how little liberties ended up turning into a 10 or 12 points where you're going, oh my God, I can't believe I got that wrong. Oh my God, I can't believe I got that
Yep.
wrong. Right? Stuff that you know. But again, it's
Mhm.
not just what you know, it's what you can do under pressure. And that's what was required. So tell me how that translated to exam day. Did you take those lessons into exam day? I mean, clearly, obviously, you got across the finish line. So tell us a little bit about how you took those lessons into exam day.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll say like a week before the exam. I'm currently residing in Atlanta, Georgia, and so the test is in Athens, Georgia, and so it's about an hour to get to. So I made sure like a week before the exam, I checked out the lay of the land, got familiar to where's the testing site at, where would I be staying at, just so that way I can take all that unnecessary anxiety away from myself. So that was fine. And I would say about the day before the exam, that's when I drove to the place and stayed overnight. And um, I may have took like a couple minutes just to make sure I remember like a certain concept, but I'll say mostly that night before the exam, that's probably the most least amount of time I spent looking over material.
Hmm.
Or you know what? There was like I watched the video as well. So I would watch like just do passive stuff. So I've watched a video just making sure I understand a certain concept. But other than that, I remember there was a game on, so I watched the game. And just took time to relax, prayed, and you say, and I told myself that whether I pass or not, like this test isn't like my identity isn't built on this credential, so that was a big part for me. I'm like, I put in the work, but whether I pass or not, I really had to just let myself know that this isn't the end all be all in life,
Good for you.
Um, yeah, so I
Just a
really had to have
test.
that. Exactly, exactly. So I really had to have that go on. And then test day, yeah, felt good, felt refreshed, made sure I had good sleep, plenty of water.
Good man.
Man, throughout taking that test, I went to the bathroom too many times to count. So it
Like
was
this guy's got a really small bladder.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So it was just man, but yeah, I felt good throughout the whole throughout most of the completely different than the last time around. Like this time
Hmm.
around when I was taking those questions, I'm like, got it, got it. And now of course there were some questions where I'm like, I just don't know. I'll give it my best try, but this was a good one. It got me. But yeah, it was just like that quiet confidence of knowing that I trust the process where you and Ramen laid out. And I trusted my work that I put in at least 3 hours almost every day, So I trusted the discipline that I put in and the sacrifices I made for it. And it was really grateful to see it pay off.
How did you feel throughout the test? Did you feel like you managed your fatigue better than you did on the mock exam? Did you were you able to manage that
Yeah, I
better
would
than what
say
you did previously?
Yeah, I would say throughout the test, yeah, definitely. And like again, anything that I may not have known up front, I just made sure to mark it and to not get bogged down by like one question that may have been more challenging for me. But like let me mark it, move on. And like after every section, the ones I marked, those are the ones where I spent a little bit more time on like, okay, let me make sure I'm really not trying to just rush through this because I don't get it. Because I know from the first time, like there was a question I didn't understand, I didn't even really like try to like figure it out. I was just
Hmm.
like, all right, I don't get it. Let me just mark it and move on. But these ones, some of those ones, it's like I could try to work to at least narrow it down. And
Hmm.
that was what was also different. Like some of those ones where I marked, it may have been something where I'm like, this concept's very familiar with me. But the way they're phrasing this question, it could be, it could be hypothetically, it could be A or B. So I was like, let me go ahead and at least try to narrow it down to two answers, and then hey, it's 50-50 chance from there. But it was a surprising to me because every mock exam, I was always so used to the first half being the half that took me the longest. And then the second half, I would kind of go into that flow state of mind and be able to like answer questions quicker
Mm,
during the second half. The actual exam, it was the complete opposite. Like I've received more scenario-based questions and like case study towards the end. And I was like, isn't this something?
yeah.
So yeah, so I feel like my pace was like on point through that first half. The
Mm,
second half, that's where I noticed that I felt like it spend more time. But also I made sure to take my lunch seriously too, because the first
mm,
time I was just like, hey, I don't need to use this 40 minutes.
right.
So again, that was something else different that I didn't really consider first
Mm,
time taking the exam till now. Like, let me make sure, rest my brain for these 40 minutes
yep.
and then go in, give it all I got. So that was a huge benefit for me as well.
So now being on the other side of this,
Hmm.
what piece of advice would you give to somebody who is in your shoes where you go in, you're not particularly far away, but you don't
Hmm.
necessarily feel like you have the grasp on the concepts that you necessarily want or feel like you need to pass the exam? What piece of advice would you give to somebody who's taking the exam in 2026 and saying, I'm in Dennis's shoes, how do I work through this?
Yeah, my piece of advice would be, cut out the distractions as much as possible. So like for me, and I actually got this from somebody in your cohort where they said like they didn't delete like social media like accounts, but they just removed them from their phone, like removed the
Yeah.
apps. So I did the same thing. I was like, all my social media apps, I'm just gonna remove them from the phone, because it can be so easy to get involved in like just scrolling like mindlessly.
Easily.
So I
Hour a day.
yeah, yeah,
Easily. Down the
exactly.
tubes. Yeah.
Exactly. So I made sure, like, from listening to that and one of your prior cohort, when she had spoke about that, I made sure to do that. But other than that piece, I would really say like trust the process of the work that they're putting in and also follow a structure to where they're not just going through the questions but
Mm,
understanding the concepts. Because that was a big part for working with you on ramen is
yeah.
that we had the structure but
Yeah.
really understanding these concepts. So even if that means less questions and reviewing more of the notes, or for me there was also something else that I did was have a whiteboard, and
Mm,
with the whiteboard, I would quiz myself like more of an active recall, like, hey, explain this concept to me. And then I would try to like teach myself,
yeah.
like, all right, here's an example of this. Can so that was another part along
Yeah.
that helped me a lot. Because sometimes, with the flashcards, that was a great tool, but I was like, all right, let me go ahead and add this dry erase board in here as
Yeah.
well, so that way I can like teach
Yeah.
myself to an extent.
The dry erase is a great little addition to the repertoire. Andy did that as well, where he was doing something similar, where it's like, here is something, let me go to the whiteboard and actually diagram it out to see how
Yep,
well I know this or don't know this and where I'm getting stuck, which is
yep,
a great way to do things. And I really like that. I didn't know that you guys were doing it, but I am a big believer in writing it out.
yep.
So
Same.
I personally, when I would be doing things and I would do it in shorthand, this leads to this, to this, to this, and then it would be a way for me to talk it out and diagram it at the same time. And obviously, you see it in my teaching style. I love charts, I love diagrams. That's the way I explain things. It's also because of the way that I interpret and internalize things as well. So it makes it easier for me to explain it. And I know that then that's where I've mastered it is if I can get it down like that. So now, last piece of a thing here is, what are you looking forward to the most now that you have this under your belt? Letters are there. What are you looking forward to the most now that this process is over?
Yeah, the most now is now I'm able to, apply what I've learned into the clients that I help my advisor with. So that's a great part of it. But also too, I'm looking forward to honestly to, if there's people that are need help with the CFP or also interested in it, that's one part. So I definitely want to encourage people that's interested in the financial planning. I want to be like a source of encouragement through the use of my own situation and how I had to go from being just that student in the classroom to now, to failing the test first time and then to now being able to say like I was able to accomplish it. So that's another big part where I look forward to being able to talk with students that's currently, going through that process in college or even if there's students that I can connect with that may not even be in college yet, but are still like curious about financial planning and the financial industry. So it's one of those things where I feel like you and Ramen poured into us and really helped us. Like I gotta, it's only necessary for me to like give that back. So not only like with helping clients and being a fiduciary to them, but also being a fiduciary to my community and my the people that help pave the way for me. I want to be that to the people that's right behind me.
Yeah, and the greatest way you can do that for us is to pay it forward.
Yep,
That's the way we keep it going, and that's how we keep the integrity of our industry high. That's what I think we all want is we want our certificate to mean something and the work that we put
yep,
in to mean something. So, Dennis, thank you so much for doing this, man. I genuinely
absolutely.
appreciate it. I'm so proud of you. You have a really bright future. You're so young, and to have this done so early in your career is it's a testament to your perseverance, to your intelligence, and to your work ethic. And I think this is only going to be one piece on a very long and successful career. And you and the rest of the cohort, you guys really made us proud, and you did an incredible job. So congratulations, man.
Thank you. And I want to extend my gratitude for you and Ramen as well throughout this process. You both have really helped me to build my confidence and understanding the material to not only pass the test, but honestly to be a better financial planner to clients as well. So I really, like I said, I've spent multiple times watching y'all videos on different topics and watching the videos in the portal as well. So again,
Oh yeah, man.
nothing but my gratitude and thankfulness for the both of you throughout this journey.
Oh man, that's incredible to hear. Thank you for sharing that with me. So we will end it right here. For all of you guys that have any questions, comments, or concerns, reach out to Raman or myself, and we will see you guys on our next episode. Take it easy, everybody.
Take